Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Brian's Horror Corner, and welcome to this Masters of Horror Season 1 episode review video as part of my current February 2024 series where I'm taking a look at all 13 episodes of the first season of Masters of Horror here, which I have on DVD. So today we're going to go ahead and take a look at the second episode that aired in the first season. Like I said, we're jumping all over the place here because the episodes are in a different order back here than they are in how they aired. But we're going to take a look at H.P. Lovecraft's Dream in the Witch House in this episode, of course, directed by Stuart Gordon, because H.P. Lovecraft and Stuart Gordon basically go together like rice and beans in a Mexican plate. So let's just go ahead and get started here with with the premise. H.P. Lovecraft's Dreams in the Witch House is the second episode of the first season of Masters of Horror, directed by Stuart Gordon. It is adapted from the short story The Dreams in the Witch House by American horror author H.P. Lovecraft. It originally aired in North America on November 4th, 2005. Ezra Godin has previously starred in another Stuart Gordon-directed Lovecraft adaptation, which is Dagon, based on Lovecraft's novella The Shadow over Innsmouth. All right, so basically the story of this episode is about university student Walter Gilman, who moves into a very cheap room in an old boarding house. He hears screaming and rushes to help his neighbor, Francis, who is being chased by a large rat. He seeks assistance from the manager, but he refuses to help. One of the tenants, Mazowitz, asks Walter if the large rat had a human face. He becomes close with Frances the following week and even lends her money to keep her in the boarding house. So that's kind of the setup and the premise, and then it goes from there. Some strange things start to happen to this guy, this university student, and as far as the cast goes, we have Ezra Godin as Walter Gilman, Jay Brazo as Mr. Dombrowski, Campbell Lane as Mazowitz, and Chella Horsdal as Francis Elwood. So that's the setup, the premise, and the cast for episode 2 from season 1, Dreams in the Witch House for Masters of Horror. My review, I liked this episode well enough. It didn't quite have the same impact on me as the first one that I reviewed, Cigarette Burns. But there's quite a bit that works for me in this episode. A few things that don't, but let's just go ahead and get into them, starting with the things that I liked about the episode. I liked the setting of the old decrepit boarding house. I thought it looked really well. I thought it really puts you in the mood, the viewer in the mood for some horrific things that could happen. Just that old decrepit, rundown, rats running around kind of boarding house for cheap, which people are willing to live in for cheap pay, for cheap rent. And it includes a manager who doesn't care about fixing anything or helping anybody out, of course. I think that makes for a really good horror setting. So I thought they did a really good job with the setting there. I think the premise is interesting and somewhat unique, not exclusively, but I thought it was executed fairly well by Gordon as well. Probably not as well as it could have been. But good enough for a pretty good episode, despite the fact that it has a lower television's, having a lower budget for a television series as opposed to one of the movies that he adapted from H.P. Lovecraft, like Reanimator, of course. I thought he executed it pretty well, and I did think the premise was fairly interesting here. The performances are good, especially by our main lead, Ezra Godin, as Walter. He was a somewhat sympathetic character that we could relate to, especially as the episode went on, because he's a guy that's trying to do the right thing, that's trying to fight back and stop terrible things from happening, things that he's being forced to do. Of course, with all these reviews, I don't want to give too much away. They're spoiler-free for the most part. So, but yeah, I thought the performances were good. There's only really 4 or 5 performers in this episode, 4 in the cast that I named off as far as like main characters. But I thought they were all good, led well by Ezra Godin. Let's see. There is some pretty decent blood and gore, especially like the back gouging / scratching scene by the witch that takes place in this episode. I thought that was pretty effective. It was one of those that makes you cringe, especially if you're a guy, as you see the fingernails, form a pattern in one of the characters' backs here. Definitely drawing blood, if not some flesh even. So I thought that was pretty good. It's not overly gory. I'm sure there's other episodes in this series that are gorier. But there is some blood and gore here to take note of, I thought. That was the most effective part for me. They do. The episode does go pretty dark towards the end of the episode. I won't say too much about what it is, but it involves a small child, in fact, an infant, and where they go with it. Even though, of course, they don't show anything, you know, too visceral, but just the idea of it is very dark for sure. So I give them credit for that because a lot of, especially TV series, they won't go that dark at the end of the day, and this one did. So overall, I thought there was decent atmosphere throughout this episode. For all you nude buffs out there, that you do have full frontal nudity in a scene, and so there's definitely some female nudity here for those of you that are looking for that. My favorite scene is probably the scene where they recall the Necronomicon in the university library that one of our characters are in. I thought that was really cool. A shout out to Sam Raimi and the Evil Dead, of course, but the look of the Necronomicon was pretty good, I thought. Definitely borrowing from Sam Raimi and the Evil Dead there as far as the look of it goes. But yeah, I really like that scene. That's where one of our characters sort of wakes up in there and then closes the book, and we see that it's the Necronomicon. So yeah, those are kind of my pros or the things that I liked about this episode. As far as cons go, as I mentioned, it does have a lower budget, and I thought the lower budget nature of the TV series came out more in this episode than the first one I reviewed, particularly as it relates to the rat in this episode with the human face. Whether it's from a distance or close up, I thought it looked pretty bad, pretty fake and ridiculous at times. So that kind of took me out of the story and out of the episode at certain times throughout it. I didn't really completely care for the ending of the episode. I mean, I mentioned that they go dark towards the end, which I gave them credit for. But as far as like from a narrative standpoint, the title of this is Dreams in the Witch House. But one certain character when it seems like a certain character sort of won or defeated another character, not really. It makes the title far less appropriate. I thought it was a bit of a convenient plot twist, frankly, that didn't completely work for me at the end. That's the best way to sum it up. And while I thought the plot was interesting, it's not a very scary episode. There's a couple of creepy parts, but for the most part, there could have been a missed opportunity there in terms of making it a little bit more horrific, a little scarier. Some character conveniences that didn't make a lot of sense that we tend to get in horror, like Frances not calling the police at a certain point to protect her baby after another character's said he's basically being driven to kill her baby. I mean, I'd either grab my kid and get the fuck out of there. I'd be calling the police and making sure they're there. Or, yeah, like I said, just not leaving. So, and again, that's there because it needs to move the plot forward, basically, which I'm going to call out episodes and movies that do that because I think there's a better way. And then finally, there's some bad CGI effects, as I mentioned, related to the rat. But also, there's some other effects in here that are CGI, or in the mid 2000s. So that was kind of part of that TV series budget. So overall, though, guys, this isn't a bad episode. I don't really have too much more to say about it. I think it's effective. It's definitely worth a one-time watch. I definitely wouldn't skip over it if I'm watching all 13 episodes of this series. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Maybe a little bit more on the generous side, but I guess I'm feeling generous today. I had a good enough time with it, basically. It certainly didn't have the impact on me like the first episode that I reviewed did. It's still watchable. It got some good things about it. So I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 for... what's it called now? I forgot the name of it already. Dreams in the Witch House, which is the second episode that aired in season 1. So 7 out of 10 for Dreams in the Witch House from season 1 of Masters of Horror. So please like this video, hit the little notification bell down below, and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of my upcoming reviews for this series, as well as any of my great horror content coming out after this series for the rest of the year, basically. Other than that, I hope you're enjoying this Masters of Horror Season 1 review series. And of course, as always, stay scared. Bye.